living in the West, I know how you feel when I used to live there. In the heart, you feel depressed. Prophet ﷺ said, the cure for the depression is jihad fi sabilillah.
That was an ISIL fighter from the West and why he joined the organization. To shed more light on the phenomenon, we have joining us two former radicals who have now changed their views. From Toronto, we have Mubin Sheikh. He is a former extremist who later turned into an informant for the Canadian Intelligence Service. He played a major role in thwarting a terror plot in 2006. And joining us here in Washington is Tawfik Hamid, an Islamic thinker and reformer and one-time Islamic extremist from Egypt. Thanks to both of you for joining us.
Pleasure.
Tawfik, let me start with you. You once joined a very militant Islamic group called Al-Jamal al-Islamiyah. Why did you join that group? That was many years ago.
Yeah, it was around 33 or 35 years ago. And I joined them, believe me, for one simple reason. I was motivated to serve my religion and God, nothing more than this. I was highly educated. My family was a wealthy family. My family was a very liberal family. And I developed such a dedication to serve God and religion. And this was, for me, the way to serve it. So its energy was in me to serve God and the religion, and it was directed wrongly.
Let's go to Mubin in Canada. Mubin, you once said that you were ready to go to Afghanistan to become a jihadist because it was the right thing to do. But later, you became an informant for the Canadian Security Service. What made you change your mind? And, I mean, what did you do as an informant?
So, I first got indoctrinated or introduced to the concept in 1995. I had gone to India and Pakistan, and in Pakistan I was in Quetta, which is where the Taliban Shura was, and later Al-Qaeda Shura would be. When I met them, I was a young kid who I had an identity crisis living in the West, so I had a public school life during the day and a Quran school life at night. And I didn't know who I was supposed to be. How much of one side should I be? So when I met the Taliban, I met them and they said to me, it was a chance encounter. They said, look, jihad is the way to bring about change in the world. So I kept that up, the jihadi mentality, until the 9/11 attacks, which made me really reconsider my views. I then moved to Syria to study Arabic and Islamic studies. And it's there that I moved away from my views after studying, the Quran properly, the context, the history, of the verses of the Quran that talk about fighting. And eventually I became an operative, is the correct term. I was actually undercover for about 2 years in other cases. About one of those cases moved on to become a public prosecution, and that's how I became known as an undercover in that context.
Right, Tawfik, you said a moment ago that you joined the militant Islamic organization because you thought that was the best way to serve your religion. Is that to some extent why, and just to some extent, why some people, young people, are now joining groups like ISIS?
Yes, certainly. There is no doubt about this. This could be seen as the main cause of the problem. There could be some contributing factors or factors that drive someone to join the group initially. Like we can say that, for example, it's much easier to recruit a poor, deprived person full of hatred to the society, to such groups, than or recruiting someone who is not in such situation. But we have to be very clear in our...
Because these are not poor, deprived people.
But that is the point. That the cause of the problem is radicalism and the process it uses to brainwash people. That is the main cause of the problem. To create hatred toward the other, to create intolerance, to use the hellfire tactic and the torture, the fear mechanism, to use sex as a factor that makes people ready to die, to go to paradise, to have sex with women there. And I've seen many cases like this. So this is a fundamental cause. But there could be other contributing factors, like some people try to find their identity, for example. They join the group, but we have to distinguish between the cause of the problem and the contributing factors for the problem. And if we want to fight this problem effectively, we have to focus on the cause, because sometimes, like poverty, as I mentioned to you in some earlier discussion, that radicalism itself and terrorism causes poverty in the areas where they have high terrorism level. You don't have foreign investment, you have tourism industry collapsing in many places that needs it. So at the end, the poverty can be seen as an outcome of terrorism rather than simply the cause of the problem. Okay. It's an outcome for
it. Right, let me get Mubin's take on this. Mubin, Mubin, I mean, there are thousands of people from dozens of countries clamoring to join groups like ISIL in the Middle East. Why do you think they're going there?
You know, I would have to agree with the doctor. I mean, I simplify it as grievance-based ideology. The ideology will not have traction if there isn't some kind of pre-existing political problem. And even, I mean, you could say, I mean, it's interconnected. So a person might think that, look, you know, I should be living in a khilafah, in a caliphate, but I'm living in a democracy. So there's no real grievance in that sense. It's just he feels that he's entitled to living in an Islamic state. But especially with Western individuals who are going, you know, when you look at somebody who is going through an identity crisis, look, you have a young kid who's living in the West. He has no good job, no prospect of marriage. He's a loser.
But can I just add
one moment, I'll give you a chance. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, just as an example, I mean, and I agree with the doctor, I mean, these are contributing factors. I'm just looking at an example of a kid who's, he probably doesn't know the religion very well. He doesn't. He knows that he's supposed to be Muslim. He's watching videos of suffering, killing, killing. He develops what's called a vicarious deprivation, that he himself is not physically deprived, but he's looking at others who are deprived, and then he begins to think their deprivation is my deprivation. I must do something. So the group will offer him a status, a hero status. And this is somebody who's coming from, he's got nothing really going on in his life. Now he has an opportunity to belong to something greater. He has an opportunity to become a hero. And that's really something that they really look forward to.
Right, he's found his identity. Tawfik, you want to say?
I would like to say that I agree that the political factors and the identity issue are used to create jihadists. However, we cannot say that they are the main cause of the problem. It's important to emphasize this because the same factors does not work for non-Muslims who live under the same socio-economic and political circumstances.
Right.
Like, for example, why we didn't see the same percentage of Iraqi Christians, for example, doing or Christians who migrate to other countries, why they do not adopt jihad, for example, or why they don't do terrorism. They live under the same economic circumstances, same work problem, same feel of identity crisis sometimes.
Yeah. Okay, I've just got 30 seconds left. Mubin, I want to ask you a question, a bit of a personal question. How did the Muslim community respond after it was revealed that you had been acting as an operative for the Canadian Intelligence Service, perhaps being looked at as one of the enemy?
Of course, I mean, the narrative that developed was that I was a traitor to my people. That's one narrative. I mean, the other narrative was people were actually, they thanked me. You know, I've had both sides. I mean, you have some who don't like it, and these are people who are sympathizers, or they feel, whatever the case, you know, the West is the enemy, so I help the enemy, therefore I'm the enemy. But you know, just to echo that point of Dr. Hamid, that, yeah, I mean, ideology is, when your worldview is shaped by religious identity, then everything you think and everything you do will flow from that ideology.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. Mubin Sheikh in Toronto, Tawfik Hamid here in Washington. Thank you. That is it for this edition of The Heat. We'd love to hear from you, so please send us your questions, comments, and story ideas to theheat@cctv-america.com. You can continue the conversation on Facebook at CCTV America. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.